Ever feel like some people have a drama magnet glued to their back? Like they constantly attract emotional vampires, manipulators, and just plain toxic individuals, while others seem to glide through life, barely registering on these emotional predators' radar. If you're watching this, chances are you've been there. You're exhausted, drained, tired of feeling like a pawn in someone else's psychological game. Maybe you're the peacekeeper, the overgiver, the conflict avoider, always trying to smooth things over, only to find yourself caught in the same old vicious cycle. And deep down, a whisper starts to grow. Is it me? Am I the problem? Today, I need you to lean in, because what we're about to uncover could completely shift your perspective. Carl Jung, the brilliant founder of analytical psychology, stumbled upon something most people don't even imagine. It's not just about luck, fate, or some cosmic bad karma. There's a profound, almost invisible mechanism at play, determining who becomes a target for toxic people and who remains blissfully unseen. And no, it's not because those invisible people are louder, tougher, or more aggressive. It's something far quieter. And precisely for that reason, infinitely more potent. You see, toxic people are like emotional predators. They don't hunt randomly. They sniff out the emotional wounds you still carry, those raw, unhealed spots within you. They're masters at detecting vulnerabilities, insecurities, and fears that you desperately try to hide. And that is what makes you visible to them. The secret to becoming psychologically inaccessible isn't about fighting them head-on. It's not about shouting, cutting off every relationship, or building impenetrable walls around yourself. The real secret lies in something Jung called integrating your shadow. Today I want to speak directly to you, the one tired of feeling drained, of carrying burdens that aren't yours, of constantly being on the defensive. I want to show you a way out. But it's not the usual self-help fluff you hear everywhere. It's not about catchy affirmations or endless boundary lists. It requires something much deeper, knowing and embracing the darkest, most uncomfortable parts of yourself, the ones you might be ashamed to even admit exist. Jung famously said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And this understanding, it changes everything. Because the moment you stop projecting your shadows onto others, toxic people simply stop seeing you as a target. It's like you become invisible to them. Not because you're hiding, but because you no longer have those emotional cracks for them to exploit. So stick with me until the very end of this video. Today I'll show you how to master this secret, not just to keep toxic people away, but to finally become truly free. Free to cultivate healthy relationships. Free to walk through the world without fear. Free to be your authentic self without invisible chains. Because the secret was never about fighting toxicity. It's always been about transcending the need to be seen or validated by those who dwell in the shadows. Ready? Let's dive deep into a territory few dare to tread. Carl Jung, in all his genius, dedicated a significant part of his life to studying the invisible mechanisms governing the human psyche. One of his most profound discoveries was this: unconscious patterns, often rooted in early experiences and unresolved emotional issues, can manifest as destructive behaviors, both in ourselves and in others, even if they seem socially acceptable or not overtly aggressive. This means toxic people don't just appear out of nowhere, nor do they pick their victims at random. They possess an almost animalistic instinct for sniffing out what's wounded within us, as it resonates with the unintegrated shadow and complexes inside them. They perceive, without a single word, where you're vulnerable, where you hide fear, shame, or unmet needs. If you constantly find yourself entangled in drama, manipulative situations, or relationships where you always feel compelled to prove your worth or defend your sanity, understand this. It's not because there's something fundamentally wrong with you. It's because, unknowingly, you're emitting subtle signals. Signals that tell the world, there's a part of me that's still open, still hurting. Jung called these projections. Everything you don't accept within yourself, everything you repress, transforms into a kind of energy that leaks out into the world. Toxic people are like predators smelling this emotional blood. They gravitate towards the wounded because that's where they can exert power, control, and feed off the drama that consumes you from within. But Jung discovered something even more fascinating. When you integrate those aspects you've been trying to hide, your shadow, you create what he called psychic integrity. And psychic integrity? It's almost palpable. It's like a vibrational frequency that repels those who are used to exploiting emotional weaknesses. Toxic people simply lose interest in those who don't react to their games, who don't show fear, who don't need their approval or validation. People with psychic integrity don't live in a constant war against others. They're not always armed, tense, waiting for the next attack. They exist in a state of profound internal solidity. They know who they are, what they want, and most importantly, what they are not willing to tolerate. And this unwavering solidity is unconsciously perceived by those who feed off chaos. It's as if emotional predators start seeing these individuals as hard, smooth stones, no purchase for their claws. Jung stated, "The shadow is a living part of the personality. Denying it does not make it disappear. It only turns it into weakness. But when you integrate it, when you acknowledge it, it transforms into strength. It begins to work in your favor, creating an energy field that naturally repels those who seek to exploit your insecurities." Perhaps you're thinking, okay, but how do I do this? How do I integrate something I don't even know exists? This, my friend, is where the real work begins. Because psychic integrity isn't achieved through motivational memes or a quick read of a self-help book. It's a deep, sometimes painful, yet absolutely liberating journey. In the next section, I'll guide you into this territory. We'll explore how to recognize the projections you make onto others and discover why what irritates or fascinates you most about toxic people is almost always a mirror of your own unhealed wounds. Are you ready to take this first step? Then let's move forward. If this content is resonating with you, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow and reach more people searching for these profound insights. Thank you. Now we arrive at a place almost no one wants to go, looking inward. Because it's so much easier to blame the outside world, to point fingers at toxic people, labeling them as narcissists, emotional vampires, or manipulators. And while all of that might even be true, if it were just that, cutting ties would be enough. We'd be safe. But reality isn't that simple, is it? You've probably noticed that even after changing environments, jobs, or even cities, the pattern often repeats itself. You leave one abusive relationship only to stumble into another eerily similar one. You escape a controlling boss and find another just around the corner. You distance yourself from a manipulative friend, and suddenly, someone just like them pops up in your life. Why does this happen? Carl Jung offers us a brutal, yet ultimately liberating answer. What intensely irritates or attracts us in others is often a reflection of what we deny or repress within ourselves. This is what he called projection. Projection is when you take parts of yourself, parts you can't stand to see or admit, and plaster them onto the image of another person. Suddenly, that toxic individual represents everything you hate, or everything you secretly desire but are afraid to acknowledge. Think about someone who evokes strong anger, disgust, or even a strange fascination in you. Now, turn that gaze inward. What exactly bothers or attracts me so much about this person? Perhaps you despise their selfishness, their authoritarian streak, or their manipulative tactics. But if you look deeper, you might realize there's a part of you that also longs to set firm boundaries, that desires power, that wants to be heard without having to ask for permission. Perhaps this part of you was repressed long ago in childhood, told that anger was wrong, that wanting attention was ugly, that speaking your mind was dangerous. So you learn to bury those impulses. And every time you encounter someone who lives out that shadow without guilt, an explosive reaction arises, hatred, repulsion, or even an irresistible attraction. Jung asserted, only with the transformation of the individual's attitude will the psychology of the nation begin to transform. What he meant is this: if you don't look inward, if you don't discover which of your own wounds are still open, you will continue to send signals to the world, proclaiming, here there is pain, here there is pain, here there is insecurity, here there is fear. And toxic people, they can smell that from a mile away. They zero in precisely where they sense vulnerability. Recognizing your projections isn't easy. It's often painful to admit that, at times, what makes you feel like a victim is also connected to something within you. But it's precisely at this point that your true power lies. When you ask yourself, with brutal honesty, what is this person reflecting in me? You begin to pull back that energy that was scattered throughout the world. You stop wasting strength trying to change others and start transforming it into profound self-knowledge. This isn't about blaming yourself for the actions of toxic people, far from it. It's about understanding that while you can't control who the world puts in your path, you can control what you emit to the world. And when you stop projecting, you become inhospitable territory for emotional predators. They simply no longer see an opportunity to feed off you. But there's another fundamental step, learning not to feed the game of toxic people. Ready to go even deeper? Then continue with me. Now that you've started to understand the projections you carry within yourself, we need to talk about something equally crucial, the drama. Because recognizing your shadows is the first step. But if you continue to feed the emotional games of toxic people, nothing will change. And perhaps this is one of the hardest truths to accept. Often, it is us who, without realizing it, provide the exact nourishment these emotional predators seek. Toxic people need something to survive, and it's not just your attention. They need your emotional energy. They feast on your fear, your anger, your insecurity, your resentment. Every outburst you have, every attempt to convince them they're wrong, every heated speech or desperate plea, all of it is pure sustenance for those who thrive on chaos. It's like a perverse dance. They provoke, you react. They throw out little emotional bait, a criticism, an irony, a punitive silence, a thinly veiled accusation. And then they watch. When you bite the bait, when you lose control, they win. Because in that moment, it no longer matters who is right or wrong. The focus shifts to your emotional reaction. You become the problem. You're crazy, exaggerated, too sensitive. And worse, you're left feeling guilty, exhausted, ashamed, while they walk away unscathed, often playing the victim. How many times have you found yourself trying to rationally explain something to someone who clearly has no interest in understanding? How many times have you argued, presented facts, hoping they'd finally see the light? And what happened? Nothing. Or worse, you left the conversation even more confused, questioning your own sanity. This isn't a coincidence. Toxic people instinctively know how to mess with your perception of reality. They know that if they can throw you off balance, push you into an emotional state, they've already won half the battle. Jung teaches us that what you resist persists. When you react intensely, you are, in practice, giving more power to what you want to combat. You are shouting, "This affects me deeply." And it is precisely this information that toxic people use against you. They map your emotional weaknesses, observe your triggers, and from there, keep you trapped in a web that seems impossible to break. So, what's the antidote? Neutrality. And please, don't confuse neutrality with weakness or passivity. Being neutral is not about silently swallowing everything or becoming a doormat. It is, in fact, A profound act of power. When you respond to provocations with serenity, with conscious silence, or simply refuse to engage in their game, you completely deflate their emotional balloon. You take away the food from the hungry creature. Toxic people cannot stand those who don't react. They quickly lose interest when they realize they can't destabilize you. And over time, they begin to avoid you, because your very presence becomes a constant reminder that they have no control over you. However, to reach this point, you need to master the art of controlling your reactions. This isn't easy, especially when we carry old wounds that surface in response to certain behaviors. That's why, in addition to recognizing your projections and stopping the feeding of the drama, there's another fundamental pillar in shadow integration: the development of your internal boundaries. Many people think that having boundaries means just learning to say no to others. But let me tell you a truth that few share. External boundaries are useless if you don't have internal boundaries. The true defense against toxic people starts within you. Toxic people don't just invade your schedule, your physical space, or your time. They primarily invade your mind. And they do this because they find open doors. These doors are your unresolved needs, the need to be accepted, the need to please, the need to prove you're right, the need to avoid conflict at all costs, the need to be seen as a good person. As long as these needs are screaming inside you, anyone can use them as levers to manipulate you. Carl Jung helps us understand why this happens. He said, "The shadow is the living part of the personality. As long as you do not integrate your shadow, it governs you from the unconscious." And do you know what one of the biggest shadows we carry is? The idea that we need to be loved by everyone. That we need to be seen as correct, fair, kind, polite people. And behind that, there's a deep fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of being alone. Toxic people can smell this fear like sharks smell blood. They know that just threatening to withdraw affection, respect, or approval is enough to keep you trapped in their game. Sometimes they don't say anything directly. They just change their tone of voice, look away, fall silent, creating that tense atmosphere in the air. And immediately, you find yourself trying to fix the situation. Apologizing, over-explaining, begging, and just like that, they regain power over you. Internal boundaries mean knowing, deep down, that you do not need anyone's approval to exist. They mean having absolute clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you will not tolerate. And most importantly, they mean knowing that you are willing to lose relationships, opportunities, or even the goodwill of others to remain true to yourself. This doesn't mean you need to live armed, distrustful, or isolated. On the contrary, when you have internal boundaries, you live with much more lightness. Because there's no longer a constant fear of losing others' acceptance. You know that no matter what happens, you will be okay with yourself. And this energy of solidity becomes perceptible to everyone, including toxic people, who simply lose interest because there are no more hooks for them to hang on to. Internal boundaries also prevent you from falling into others' emotional games. When someone tries to provoke, manipulate, or test your weak points, you can observe the game without getting emotionally involved. You notice the maneuver, but you don't feel obligated to react. You maintain your peace, because you know that that person's opinion or mood does not define who you are. But here's a hard truth. Developing internal boundaries requires courage. It requires facing the parts of yourself that still feel small, needy, desperate for acceptance. It requires sitting face to face with the fear of loneliness, the fear of judgment, the fear of being seen as selfish or cold. And only those willing to traverse this territory achieve real freedom. It's a process. No one wakes up overnight with unbreakable boundaries. But every time you choose to stay true to yourself, even if someone distances themselves or criticizes you, you reinforce those boundaries. And every time you do this, your energy changes. You begin to emit signals of psychic integrity. And as we mentioned before, toxic people feel this immediately and prefer to look for another target. But there's still a crucial point in this journey. Perhaps the deepest and most transformative of all. Because it's not enough to recognize your projections, stop feeding the drama, or build internal boundaries. You need to have the courage to face the darkest part that resides within you. Because as long as you continue to reject your own darkness, someone will always be able to use it against you. And that is what we will talk about next. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Even The Shadow Breaks Down Jung's Core Ideas offers a deep dive, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment below. Now we enter the darkest, and paradoxically, the most liberating territory of this entire journey. Accepting your own darkness. Because up to this point, we've discussed projections, stopping reactions, and internal boundaries. All essential. But at the root of all vulnerability that attracts toxic people lies one thing: the refusal to accept the darkest parts of our own soul. Carl Jung wisely stated, "To know your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." This isn't just a beautiful phrase, it's a powerful declaration. Because everything you hide, everything you pretend doesn't exist, everything you find ugly, shameful, or unacceptable in yourself becomes a weapon that can and will be used against you. Let's be honest. We all have dark thoughts. We all feel envy, resentment, wounded pride. We've all felt the urge to hurt, manipulate, lie, or seek revenge. But most of us bury these parts deep down, convinced that if no one knows, then they don't exist. But they do, and they remain alive, pulsating in the underground of the psyche, constantly seeking ways to manifest. The problem is, the more you hide your shadow, the more it grows in the dark. And worse, the more vulnerable you become to those who can sense your weaknesses. Toxic people have a radar for sensing where you are afraid. If you're someone who does everything to always appear good, always correct, always perfect, they will instinctively poke at the wounds that remind you that you're not so perfect after all. And then you lose control, you react. You try to prove otherwise, and you fall right back into the drama cycle. Knowing the shadow does not mean becoming a cruel, cold, or selfish person. It means recognizing that all these facets exist within you and learning to relate to them consciously. It means knowing that yes, you can feel anger, but you don't have to act on it. That yes, you can have dark thoughts, but that doesn't define who you are. It's when you accept that you have the capacity to be cruel, that you become genuinely compassionate, because you choose to be so. It's when you recognize your own envy that you stop allowing it to corrode you. It's when you admit that there's a part of you that would like to have power or control that you stop falling into the game of those who try to dominate you. This process isn't simple. It often hurts. It means tearing down the masks you've built over the years to be accepted, loved, admired. It means looking at impulses that you may judge as horrible. But Jung knew that the greatest danger is not in the shadow itself. It is in ignoring it. Because everything that remains unconscious drives your life, and you start to call it destiny. When you integrate your shadow, something extraordinary happens. You feel lighter. You stop fearing the judgment of others, because nothing anyone says about you can deeply affect you. You already know your own demons. And this creates a psychic freedom that toxic people simply cannot stand. They feed on your fear, your shame, your need to hide who you are. When they realize that you have nothing left to hide, they completely lose interest. Carl Jung left us an extraordinary legacy. He understood something that modern psychology is still trying to assimilate today. You cannot control the toxic people around you. You cannot prevent them from existing. Nor can you stop the world from having people who feed on chaos, manipulation, or the pain of others. But there is something you can do, and it is infinitely more powerful. You can become someone that these people instinctively avoid. When you integrate your shadow, when you stop projecting your unhealed wounds, when you develop internal boundaries and learn not to feed the drama, you begin to emit a completely different energy. It is as if you become psychologically invisible to those who are hunting for weaknesses. You start to exist on another level of reality, where there are no emotional cracks for toxic people to enter. They realize that they have nowhere to hold on to, no way to provoke you, no way to manipulate you, and they simply walk away. But the transformation doesn't stop there. Integrating the shadow isn't just about repelling toxic people. It's about freeing yourself to live authentically. It's discovering that you don't need anyone's validation to exist. It's feeling an inner peace that doesn't depend on who praises you or who criticizes you. It's living without fear of your own dark side, because you know it exists, but you also know that you don't have to be governed by it. People who integrate their shadow become magnetic to other healthy, balanced, and mature individuals. Your relationships change. Your professional environment changes. Your energy changes. You stop feeling drained after social interactions. You stop feeling exhausted from trying to maintain masks or control how others perceive you. And you start attracting people who resonate on the same frequency of truth, respect, and depth. Jung said, "That which you resist persists." As long as you fight against your own darkness, it will continue to find ways to manifest and to attract people who will force you to see it. But the moment you decide to integrate that part of yourself, your whole life begins to reorganize. You free yourself from fear, you free yourself from guilt, and you start to experience something that few truly know: the feeling of being whole. If this video resonated with something in you, if at any moment you thought, "This is what I need," then I want to make you an invitation. Write in the comments below what point impacted you the most. Whatever it was, write it down. Putting it into words is also an act of integration. It's bringing the unconscious into consciousness. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel now. Continue this journey. The next video is just as important as this one. See you there.